We're talking today to Kelly Kennedy, the author of They Fought for Each Other. This is the triumph and tragedy of the hardest hit unit in Iraq. It's published by St. Martin's, and Kelly is a staff reporter for Army Times. Give us a little background. You've been a reporter, a soldier, and now a book writer. What was the sequence?
I started as a soldier. I served in Iraq and in Somalia, and then went to school for journalism. And then
Where?
Colorado State University.
How long were you in the service?
4 years.
4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When you were in Mogadishu, and then you were in Desert Storm.
Desert Storm and then Mogadishu.
Okay. Did you think about writing a book then?
I knew I wanted to be a reporter, and I was taking notes and doing a journal and thinking that I wanted to write a book, but I just never did. So,
Kelly, Mark Bowden wrote a book in 1993, Black Hawk Down. Were you aware of it, or were you influenced by it?
yeah, I'd say so. We'd left Somalia. My unit was support, so we left Somalia long before the Black Hawk Down happened. But I remember I was in college when his book came out, and that was after Duran had been dragged down the streets. And I just remember how much that affected me just because I'd been there. So yeah, I'd say his book definitely.
When you were in the service, were you combat, or did you have a specialty that was non-combat?
I was signal. As a female, I can't be combat.
Ah. Okay, now we come to 2 years later. You are a reporter. Were you assigned to go overseas, or did you request that?
Sort of half and half. I said I'm willing, and they said okay, we're sending you. So.
All right. And you got yourself embedded with a unit in Iraq. Tell us about that.
Well, I went over as a medical reporter, and I was interested in covering combat stress and combat wounds. And I'd heard that this physician assistant in Adamia, Iraq, with the Charlie 126 was the best medic in Iraq and country. And so I asked if I could embed with them, and that's how that happened.
How long were you embedded?
I was with them only for a few days. I was in Iraq for 10 weeks.
Would the word embedded apply to the whole 10-week period?
Sure. It was different units. It just wasn't with them.
Did you walk around with a notepad or a tape recorder or a video camera? What did you walk around with?
Camera.
The old-fashioned one?
Right.
Good. How do you capture things you didn't see?
In the book?
Yeah.
You know, it was interesting when I started interviewing these guys. They were so descriptive. It was really not that difficult to pick it up, I don't think. And they I think when they were in Iraq, because they were sort of by themselves, they told each other the stories over and over again. So if you talk to the guys, if you ask them about a certain incident, it's almost like they use the same words when they're telling the story. I think it's kind of this group story that they've told over and over amongst themselves and then told to me. So
if somebody tells you something afterwards, you weren't there, but he says it's true, do you go back and verify with other people?
I actually had the first sergeant and the company commander read the book before it was published, because I knew that at least they would be able to tell if something was completely out there, or if someone said that they did something that they hadn't done. And they were there for a lot of the conversations too, and they knew the guys well enough to be able to tell if that was correct or not. So there were a couple of things where they're like, you need to go back over this. But
I read the book and found it powerful and in many ways devastating. It's unrelenting in its description of combat. What was the impact on you, the author, in getting that level of intensity?
Well, it was difficult from the start. It was difficult being with them on June 21st when that was their hardest day. And then it was difficult hearing the stories. The guys hadn't really talked about what they'd experienced with other people. So when I talked to the first sergeant, he talked for 8 hours straight, just talked.
This was a guy who was always willing to talk to you?
No, he hadn't been willing to talk to me when they first got back. This is someone, he said that he talked to me because I'd talked to so many of his guys for the initial stories, so he was willing to trust me. And then going back through and listening, I did tape record those interviews for the book. going back and listening to those interviews and typing, I just cry. And then trying to reconstruct the story, like Ross McGinnis, Ian Newland talking about how Ross threw himself on the grenade and saved his 4 friends. I was a mess writing those chapters.
But he lost his life.
He did. He did. He was very well loved.
Were you filing for the paper the whole time? Were you thinking through the question of the book?
Well, we wrote an initial series. It was called Blood Brothers, and that ran soon after they got back from Iraq. So that ran in December of 2007. And I don't think I was thinking about a book at that point. I don't think I got it. I think I was so involved in the story at that point that I didn't understand how big it was.
We met because you got a fellowship from the Rosalind Carter Mental Health Journalism Program. I'm one of the advisors. And that fellowship came with a cash award. How did you choose to use it?
Well, after embedding with these guys and watching them come home, I wanted to do more on combat stress. So I wrote about post-traumatic stress. That was my project. But what I did was embedded at home with a soldier who'd worked mortuary affairs in Iraq.
Mortuary affairs?
Yeah, so basically his job was to take care of the bodies, both theirs and ours. And he came back home with a very serious case of post-traumatic stress disorder. And for me, it was important to find out more than the diagnosis and more than what the symptoms were, to see those symptoms and see how it felt. And so with the fellowship, I was able to spend about a year. I mean, I still talk to them probably weekly, just seeing how he lived and what his family was like and how this affected his marriage. And it was a pretty fantastic fellowship. And then the other thing that was helpful for me is, as I was dealing with my own issues from being with these guys, I think the Carter Fellowship helped me understand them a little bit better.
Your issues could well be the issues that any other reporter deals with in experiencing traumatic situations. Let me probe a little bit deeper. How do you deal with the issues in terms of what you experienced over there?
Well, when I came back on June 21st, they lost 5 guys and we were with them. And then a female MP was decapitated that day too. And when I got back, I was blowing through stoplights, and it was taking me 3 hours to read the newspaper in the morning, and I was sad. And at the time, I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't know what was happening to me. Even as someone who covers post-traumatic stress, I just didn't understand. So now I think that the best way to deal with it is just to know what those symptoms are and how they can affect someone who's covering them as well as the people who are dealing with it.
Do you ever get over it?
I still have some sad days, and I think that I'm probably still a little distracted sometimes when I shouldn't be. But I think that there's been a lot of healing in the way the guys and their families have reached out to me too, in ways that I didn't expect. And so it's healing that sort of went beyond what I knew I needed. It's just been pretty wonderful.
There is a picture, it comes after page 256 in your book. It's a picture of a Bradley rolling through the street of Adhamia. And the caption says that insurgents often hid explosive devices in the trash that lined the streets. If I had been in that Bradley rolling down that street, I would have been completely paranoid, because you don't know whether any rock or piece of paper or window is going to hide someone trying to kill you. Is that an accurate description of what it's like to be in that Bradley going down the street?
Almost. It's 109 degrees. There's no air conditioning. They're in full body armor. So they're sweltering and they can't see out. So there's only 2 people who can see out of the Bradley. Everyone else is just sort of waiting. So it's that terror on top of not being able to see.
I think you've done a real service for journalism and for soldiers in writing this book. I'm proud to have read the book, and it really educated me, and I appreciate your talking with us today. Thanks.